Hello everybody. Welcome back to the Jacob Teacher YouTube channel. If this is your first time, welcome. My name is Jacob and I do these live English lessons on my YouTube channel quite regularly. So if you're interested, if you enjoy these kinds of things, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tell your friends. I hope that you are all doing well tonight. It is a lovely evening here in Korea. I've got a great English lesson for you. And as always, why don't you tell me where you are watching from? Say hello in the chat room. Looks like we have Abo here. Hello, Abo. Nice to see you. RJ is with us too. RJ, thanks for joining. Kubra is here. Lanya is here. All right. Looks like lots of people are here already. That is great. Okay, so as I said, oh, wow, lots of people are commenting. Great. Tootie is here. Hello. RJ, I am good. I hope you're doing well too. Ruslan, I'm also doing well, and I hope you are doing well too. Gofran, hello to you too. So let's start. I have a really great lesson for you today. This is something that is, I feel like it's going to look difficult at first and maybe sound a little difficult, but by the end of this lesson, I hope that you will all be able to understand this word. And if you are able to understand it, if you are able to use it in conversation, in writing, it's one of those words that is really going to make you sound like a native English speaker. It's really going to allow you to do a lot of things with the vocabulary that you already know. So it's a really great word to know. Satawat is here as well. Hello, Satawat. Manar from Egypt. Hello. And Ruslan from Ukraine, Odessa. Oh, how badly I want to visit Ukraine, Odessa. That's where my dad is from, my dad's side of the family. So I'm jealous. I'd love to go there. Okay, let's get started. The way this lesson is going to work is I'm going to maybe give a 10-minute lesson at first. It'll maybe be around 5 to 10 minutes. And then there will be lots of opportunities for us to practice the language that we're learning at the end of this lesson. So, how to use despite. Despite is the word we are talking about. And the first thing I should say is that there's another phrase that basically means the exact same thing as despite that we use interchangeably. So you can use either despite or in spite of. Both of these things mean the exact same thing. Every time you see the word despite, you can use in spite of. It will not change the meaning of the sentence. So the first question, what does this mean? What does despite mean? We use despite to mean without being affected by. Without being affected by. Let's look at some examples and I will explain this a little further. So, they continued hiking despite the rain. They continued hiking despite the rain. What this means is it was raining, but these people, they were not affected by the rain. They didn't really care about it maybe, or they weren't affected by it. They continued hiking despite the rain. It's raining, but it doesn't matter. They continued to hike. They weren't affected by it. Let's look at an example using in spite of. In spite of her difficult childhood, she is a kind and gentle person. Okay? So, we're talking about some woman who had a difficult childhood, and she wasn't affected by it. In spite of it, she is today a kind and gentle person. So she was not affected by the things that happened to her in childhood. And we use, as you can see from these examples, we use despite and in spite of to contrast two different situations. He still wants to play despite his injury. So imagine an athlete who gets injured, but he's not affected by the injury. Maybe he is, maybe he's actually hurt, but he still wants to play. It's not causing him to not want to play. He still wants to play despite his injury. Another way to say this, even though he's injured, he still wants to play. It would have a very similar meaning here to use the phrase even though. So he still wants to play despite his injury. Now let's look at how we form sentences using despite, because this is really important. All of the sentences that I used here, they are followed by a noun. So we often use despite with a noun. Okay, let's look at some more examples. They wanted to go for a picnic despite the rain. So again, it's raining, but that doesn't have an effect on their desire to go for a picnic. They still want to go for a picnic despite the rain. The rain is the noun here. So despite is followed by a noun phrase, right? She was still able to study in spite of the noise in the library. The noise in the library is the noun phrase that we're using that follows in spite of. Again, in spite of, despite, the exact same thing. If I wanted to say she was still able to study despite the noise in the library, it would mean the exact same thing, okay? What it means is the noise in the library is not affecting her ability to study. She's still able to study despite or in spite of the noise in the library. We can also use despite with an ing verb. This is a little less common than using it with a noun, but we do use it sometimes. So, for example, she was late for dinner despite saying that she would be on time. So, she said that she would be on time, but she was late for dinner. She was late for dinner despite saying that she would be on time. Despite having moved last year, he wanted to move again. Okay? So this is using a perfect participle. Despite having moved last year, he wanted to move again. So he moved last year, but he still wants to move again. So sometimes we use it with an ing verb. It's a little less common, but you will see it. You will see it occasionally. By the way, as I'm talking here, I know this is the lecture part of the lesson, but if I say something that you don't understand, please just ask a question and I will do my best to come back to the question later in the comment section. Now, the last one that I wanted to show you, and this is really important. This is used very often. I would say personally that I think this formation is used most often. I use it at least most often. And again, this may look complicated at first, but all you have to do really is memorize the word order and you'll be able to use this phrase. It's that simple. So sometimes we want to use a more complicated sentence after using the word despite or in spite of. Sometimes we want that sentence after despite to be more complex, more complicated. When we want to do that, we will often use a that clause. So for example, despite the fact that blah, 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 in spite of the fact that blah, 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 blah. And if you just memorize these two phrases, that's you'll be able to do a lot with these phrases. So for example, let's look at some examples. Despite the fact that she's only 10 years old, she is very mature and independent. So despite the fact that, again, we have a longer, more complex sentence here. She's only 10 years old, she is very mature and independent. She's 10 years old, but that doesn't matter. She's already very mature and independent. So we're contrasting those two things. The fact that she's 10 years old and that she's very mature and independent. Her age is not having an effect on her maturity and level of independence. They love each other very much in spite of the fact that they fight often. They love each other very much in spite of the fact that they fight often. So they still love each other even though they fight very often. Again, if you use the phrase even though, it would have a very similar meaning here. They love each other very much in spite of the fact. Their love is not affected by the fact that they fight often. I'm going to give you a candy. This is something that maybe I've said 1 or 2 times to my students. I'm going to give you a candy despite the fact that you didn't do your homework. And again, if you replace this with even though, it would have a very similar meaning. You're contrasting giving candy and not doing homework. So even though this person didn't do their homework, despite the fact that they didn't do their homework, in spite of the fact that they didn't do their homework, I'm still going to give you a candy. So let's go to our first question. Complete the sentence. He did well on the math test, and I want you to complete the sentence using some formation of despite, using the word despite or in spite of. And let's see what you come up with. Use your imagination here. Be creative. I'm always excited to read the sentences that you come up with. Okay. Satawat asks, well, let me answer Sam first. Hello, Jacob. Could you tell us some important differences between despite and in spite of? There really aren't any, when we're using them like this, there really aren't any differences between the two. They're almost, they are exactly the same, despite and in spite of. You can always use them interchangeably. Now, if you want to say to spite someone, that's a little different. If you do something to spite someone, that means that you're almost doing it to make them mad or as an act of revenge or something. That's a whole other lesson, though, so let's not focus on that right now. But thanks for the question, Sam. It's good to see you. And RJ from Pakistan, thank you for joining. Satawat, how to use comma with this phrase. Satawat, commas are a very difficult question to answer, answering about commas, because a lot of the time a comma is up to the writer when they want to use a comma. A lot of the time it's style. So if you want to really emphasize something, then you can use a comma. If you want to emphasize the part after the comma, it really is a matter of style a lot of the time. So I don't think they're necessary here. Like, let me just, despite the fact that she was only 10 years old, she is very mature and independent. I don't think you would need a comma there. You could put one in if you wanted to really emphasize it, but commas a lot of the time are a matter of style and preference. It really depends. And it took me a long time to realize that in English. Okay? Gennady says, hi, Ukraine, Kiev, despite I used to be able to read Russian. Nesmotya na in Russian. I'm sorry, Gennady, I don't understand. Manar, I'm glad you're enjoying the lesson. Alan, he did well on the math test despite mathematics is not. So, Alan, this would be a great time to use despite the fact that. Okay? So he did well on the math test despite the fact that mathematics is not his favorite course to study, or his favorite course works fine. Gofrain, can we say despite she has only 10 years old, she is mature? Again, this would be better to use despite the fact that she is only 10 years old. She is mature. Or you could phrase it a different way. Despite only being 10 years old, despite being 10 years old, she is very mature and independent. So you can use it with an ing verb there. It really depends on how you want to phrase it. It's a matter of style at that point. Okay, great. So we have a message from Kubra. It says, despite the fact that he didn't study hard. Perfect. So he did well on the math test, despite the fact that he did not study hard. Perfect sentence. Great job. Tootie, he did well on the math test, despite the fact that he had not prepared too much for it. Perfect. Another great sentence. I think that you are understanding this well. Manar, he did well on the math test, despite he didn't study well. So you could say, despite not studying well, or despite the fact that he didn't study well. Youngmi, despite the fact he couldn't get any sleep the night before. Perfect, Youngmi Park. Despite the fact that, you want to use that there, it would sound more natural to me. I think it would be okay without it, despite the fact he couldn't get any sleep the night before. I think it would be okay without it. Most of the time, though, we always use that in this situation, despite the fact that he couldn't get any sleep the night before. He did well on the math test, despite the fact that he had stayed up the night before. Perfect, Satawat. Great sentence. Despite the fact that it wasn't weighted from him. Kubra, I don't understand that one exactly. Maybe try again. Okay, so Satawat, despite the fact that he guessed more than 50% of the questions, that he guessed on more than 50% of the questions, you could say too. Good, I'm going to keep reading your comments, and let me just switch to the next question for you. Tell me about a time when you were able to accomplish something difficult in your life, and try to use the phrase or the word despite or in spite of. So keep those comments coming. It's great to read all of them. Okay, Sam, he did well on the math test despite the fact that the questions were confusing. Great, perfect sentence. You're doing really well. Gennady, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. I know I am. Gennady says, despite the fact I am at work, I have had time to see this lesson. Perfect. Really great sentence. Okay, keep them coming. So tell me about a time in your life when you had to overcome something, when you succeeded after having to overcome something. Trying to use the word despite. So, well, let me try and think of a time in my life when I succeeded, when I overcame something. Well, let's see. I was able to come to Korea despite the fact that I was very nervous about living in another country. Okay, so that's one example from my life. Keep these answers coming. You can choose to answer this one. I have another finish the sentence for you. She got married last year, despite or in spite of. Why don't you try and switch it up? Use in spite of this time. I know it's a little bit longer. There are more words, but really just my advice to you is memorize it. In spite of or despite, the same thing. In spite of. In spite of the fact that. I know it's a lot of words, but it's really, you can take that block and do a lot of things with it in English. So it will really allow you to do many things in English, both of these words. I mean, despite the fact that this performance wasn't weighted from him. I don't know what you mean by weighted from him. And this performance wasn't weighted from him. Sorry, Kubra, I'm still having troubles understanding you from before, so I apologize about that. I don't know what you mean by performance or weighted. Your other sentences are really great, though, so keep up the great work. Okay? Let me try and finish this sentence. She got married last year despite the fact that she was 82 years old, maybe. So she was really old when she got married, despite the fact that she was 82 years old. We have a sentence from Alan. Despite the fact working out so hard, but I could do my best and made my body shape as my ideal style. Okay, so Alan, you could say that despite the fact that working out is so hard, I did my best and made my body shape and obtained my ideal body shape, you could say, or achieved my ideal body shape. Last month, I managed to answer to my clients' sudden question in monthly meeting, despite the fact that I've never thought about it before. Okay, great. So Youngmi Park, you could say more naturally, last month I managed to respond to my client's sudden question in our monthly meeting, despite the fact that I had, keep your tenses consistent, that I had never thought about it before. It's a nice long sentence, a very complicated one, and I'm glad that you were able to answer the question for your client. Great work. It's always nice when that happens, when someone asks us a question that is really unexpected, and if we're able to answer it coherently, articulately, then it's always nice. Okay, I understand now, Kubra. So he did well in the math test despite the fact that people did not expect him to succeed, you could say, or despite the fact that expectations were low, that his expectations or other people's expectations, you could say many different things and play around with that sentence. Now I understand you. So Tawat, my research got eventually published despite the negative results. Okay. So despite the negative results, you might want to specify here, I know what you're saying, you might want to specify the negative results of your study, or maybe not, maybe it's clear, but just my research got published eventually would sound more natural if you put eventually after published. My research got published eventually, despite the negative results. And congratulations, that's great. I'd love to read your research sometime. Jihan, she got married last year despite she was a student. So you could say despite being a student, or despite the fact that she is a student, or despite the fact that she was a student. Again, there are many different ways that you could play with these sentences to make them work. Okay, she got married last year despite the fact that her dad died. Despite the fact that her dad died, Amar. Perfect sentence otherwise. She got married last year in spite of the financial problems. Great, Tootie. It would be a little more natural here to specify whose financial problems. So she got married last year in spite of her financial problems, in spite of her and her husband's financial problems, in spite of her family's financial problems. You could specify who. That would be a little more natural, a little better. But great sentence, Tootie. Thank you for that. Kubra, she got married last year despite the fact that their parents didn't support them. So you want to specify whose parents. Because you started the sentence with she, you want to specify if it's her parents, if it's her husband's parents. You could say they got married last year despite the fact that their parents did not support them. That would be okay. But because you started with she, you want to talk about things in terms of her. Okay? In spite of life is so struggling, but I do my best in order to not independence nobody else. Okay, Alan, I'm going to completely change the wording here, and you could say it like this. Just in spite of the in spite of the fact that life is so difficult, I do my best in order not to be a burden on anyone else. I think that's what you mean here. If you're a burden on someone, this is a great phrase, by the way, a great vocabulary word to know. If you're a burden on someone, it's like you're sitting on their back and weighing them down. You're like a weight on their life. That's what it means to be a burden on someone. Alan, I understand your sentences. Just try and simplify them, my friend. I tell you this regularly, but just try and make smaller, more exact sentences. I understand what you're trying to say, though, so don't worry about that. Youngmi Park, she got married last year despite the fact that all the family members didn't agree with her choice of her husband. Okay, so here's a more natural way to phrase that. She got married last year despite the fact that all, again, like before, you want to specify whose family members because you're talking about she. So despite the fact that all her family members didn't agree with her choice of husband, you could say, with her choice for a husband. Choice for a husband would, I think that would be natural there. Choice of a husband. Yeah, that's a tough one, but great sentence. Keep up the great work. With some of these, simplify. When do we use the past and the present simple? With despite? Or just in general, do you mean, Amar? Tell me, be more specific with your question. Gofran, Jacob, would you please clarify how to use otherwise? You have just used now when speaking. Otherwise. Yeah, Gofran, if you remember the sentence that I used it with, because I think we use it in different ways. But usually we use it when we're talking about an option, for example, and then if we want to do something different. So if you would like to speak, I'm available to talk today. Otherwise, so like if that's not an option, I can meet next week. I can speak next week. So that's one way that we can use it. I hope that answers your question. Ask me again if you're confused, or better yet, give me an example of when I used it, and I'll be able to explain it. So Tawat, she got married last year in spite of the fact that she loves me. Oh my God, we have a love scandal going on. Great sentence, thank you for that. Let's go to the last one today. So this is a true story for you. Some of you may know this man, Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. In 1997, Michael Jordan was sick with the flu. At the time, his team was in the final round of the NBA playoffs. He had a very important basketball game to play. He finished the game with 38 points and led his team to victory. Okay? So, this is a true story. It happened to Michael Jordan in 1997. You can watch the video on YouTube. It's quite amazing. He's very, very sick during the game. But he finishes the game with 38 points, which is a lot in basketball if you're not a basketball fan. And his team wins the game. He led his team to victory. So, what could you say about Michael Jordan in this situation? Try and use in spite of or despite. Let me know. This will be our last question for the day. I've got a few more things that I need to do with despite. Okay, so Amar, going back to the past and the present simple, we almost always, Amar, use the past simple with this, with despite or in spite of. Almost always. There are some times where you can use the present simple if you're, again, talking about the present situation. So despite the fact that despite her rough childhood, despite the fact that she had a rough childhood, she is a mature and independent person. That would be, if that's what you mean by the present simple. So, but most of the time, I would say almost always, we used it in the past because we're talking about a past situation that was not affected, okay? Or something that happened in the past that didn't affect something else. What is NBA playoff, says Amar. Playoff is, so in sports you have the regular season, which is when teams, they all play each other. And then the playoffs is after the regular season when the best teams compete for the championship. So it's like the last part of the the last part of the season when everyone is competing for the championship. So it's a very important time of the year in the NBA. Alan says, in spite of the fact, fall in love sometimes so hurting, but I love to hurt, then stay single. Okay, so in spite of the fact that falling in love hurts sometimes, the hurt is better than being single, you could say. It's a complicated sentence. Again, simplify, Alan, simplify. Sam, she got married last year in spite of the fact that her mom has forced her away. Great sentence and some family drama there. That's no good for her. She followed her heart, though, and got married anyways. Good. In spite of the flu, he was playing as well as always. Great. In spite of the flu, he was playing as well as always. It would be a little more natural to, you could say it like this. In spite of the flu, he played as well as always. Yeah, you could say that. In spite of the flu, he played as well as always. You could use it like you did right there too, though. That's okay. So no, Jordan didn't give up despite the fact that he was terribly sick. Very nicely done. I like that sentence a lot. Great. Jordan didn't give up despite the fact that he was terribly sick. Michael Jordan is passionately into sport, particularly basketball, despite that he was suffering from sickness. Well, yes, that's true. It would be weird. It would be a little strange to talk about his passion for basketball. You could, I guess. So Michael Jordan is passionate about basketball even when he's suffering from sickness. Even when would be better there than despite. So we're talking about this one particular instance, Alan. But keep trying. Amar, despite Michael Jordan was sick, he played. Okay? Despite, here's a better way to phrase that, again, using an ing verb. Despite being sick, he played. Despite being sick, Michael Jordan played the game. Gennady says, Michael Jordan led his team to victory despite being ill or despite the fact that he was ill. And yes, great. Great sentences. You understand this perfectly then, I think. Okay, so that is all that I have for you today. Just another announcement here before I leave you. I think normally I try to do 2 live lessons on this YouTube channel every week. What I think I'm going to do starting now is I think that I'm going to switch my time between here and Facebook. So I'm going to try and do 1 live lesson on YouTube a week, 1 live lesson on Facebook a week, and then I'll post another pre-recorded video to YouTube as well, so that there will still be 2 YouTube videos a week on this channel. But I have a reasonably large audience on Facebook as well, and I feel like I should probably do live lessons there too. I think it would be good to split my time in between YouTube and Facebook in a more productive way. So that is an announcement. If you're not following me on Facebook, make sure to do that. The link is in the description below. We have a few more sentences here before I leave you tonight. Michael Jordan, she was late for school despite she got up early. So despite the fact that she got up early is better there. Despite the fact that she got up early. Okay, great. That is all I have for you today. Again, if you are able to use these 2 words or 2 phrases, despite and in spite of, you'll be able to do a lot with your English. So I hope that you found this lesson valuable. If you did, please, it would help me a lot. If you gave a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. And I will see you again when I see you. On Thursday, I'm going to do my live lesson on my Facebook group. So that's where I will be on Thursday. And again, I announce most of my plans in my Facebook group. That's where I'll be. I hope that you have an excellent... Oh, we have a question here. Sam, Jacob, would you please sign me up for your free Skype lessons? Yeah, so there might be some misunderstanding about that. It's actually not a free Skype lesson. It's a giveaway that I am doing because my page just reached 5,000 likes on Facebook, and the page that I'm helping manage, English Language School, they also just reached, well, they're about to reach 100,000 likes. So it's to celebrate the success of both pages. I'm giving away 2 free Skype lessons. Again, so it's not a regular thing that I'm doing, it's a contest. And the way to sign up, if you go to my website, jacobteacher.com, you'll see on the header, there's a section, I think it says free Skype giveaway. If you click on that and just fill out the form with your name and email, you'll be entered in the competition. You'll have a chance to win. So it's only 2 free Skype lessons that I'm giving away. Sorry for the misunderstanding. But that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I will see you again another time, and be well, everybody. Take care. Keep studying. Keep working hard. Bye-bye.